Hi, this is Matt Finch, and this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I have here with me as my guests Zach Glazer, Mike Badolato, and Alex Kammer. And the topic that we're going to be talking about is old school conventions because Alex is in charge of Gamehole Con, and Mike is one of the co-people in charge of North Texas RPG Con. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay, let me start out. And Zach, I've got questions for these guys, and you just sort of jump in as somebody who's been to both of the two conventions.
I'm a professional attendee, is what you're saying.
Professional attendee, there you go. And so
Okay.
the first question I want to ask you guys is both of your conventions are billed as being old school conventions, and I agree with that, but the interesting question here that we may get different answers to from y'all is what makes a convention fall into that category of old school, and or what do you do to emphasize that part of things? Let's go ahead and let me start with Mike, because he's got the older con and probably faced that a little bit less when he was founding it. So Mike?
Well, we specifically started our con to cater to old school gamers, because at the time, 10 years ago, there wasn't most of the cons that were available didn't have even have an old school track, and I noticed there was a couple of cons that were starting to run one or two first edition basic D&D games, but for the most part, it was a definite sideline to cons. They would concentrate on Magic card games and board games, and of course, at the time D&D 3.0 was big. And Doug and I just decided that it was nice to have something that people like us would like to go to, because a lot of the cons that were going on at the time, there weren't places that Doug and I would want to go to a con. And so we specifically put a no games that were created after the year 2000 on our first con. Now we've let up on that a little bit. We have D&D 5.0. We have Pathfinder. We've got all the retro clones there. But for the first con, we definitely wanted to make a statement that we're only pre-2000 games. So really, I guess it was more of a state of mind than anything else. I don't know that you could point to any one thing and say, this is OSR, this is an OSR. I mean, our definition was very artificial. It was just it was a moment in time, 2000.
And also the convention, when you guys started it, because I was there that first one, wasn't particularly hard to police because there were only about 50 people there, right?
Yeah, our attendance was only 55 people. We did not advertise. We learned the value later on of promotion. Our promotion was basically zero the first year, but it was mostly friends of ours. Friends of ours we knew that would attend. I think we did some outreach to the ASAM.
Okay, actually, let me cut you off there, because one of the things we are going to talk about is questions like how do you promote the con? So Alex, tell me a little bit about Gamehole Con in terms of what makes it an old school convention and how you back that up.
Yeah, I guess short answer is I don't know. We've only been around. This is our 5th year coming up, and I guess what makes us an old school con is the composition of the show. Here I sit in Madison, Wisconsin, very close to Lake Geneva. So the first people I reached out to are people like Frank Metzner, Ernie Gygax, Tom Wam, Tim Cass, so on, and those were our original guests. And so ipso facto, we have an old school con. We were trying to make a role-playing convention and a board game convention. And we started off our first year just under 500 attendees. We did actually a little bit of promotion, which really was me running around to different game days around the state and saying, hey, come hang out with us. And printed a few posters. That was really about it. So
yeah, on the table at GaryCon, I picked one up. I remember.
Yeah, so it was all shoe leather. So what makes it an old school con? I guess that's more of I would say, not very similar to what Doug said. Not collectible card games, not electronic entertainment. We didn't narrow things down to a certain years. We take whatever games people submit, and if they fit those general categories of role-playing game, a miniatures game, or a board game, and they seem fun, we approve it and we slot it. So really what our show is driven by our attendees as to what kind of show it is. And I still don't really know. It's growing so fast. And, we have 2,000 events. That's not because I'm directing it or any of the guys are directing it in a certain way. People are submitting these games, and that's what we're getting. So we have a lot of what would be considered old school games. We also have, if you consider 5th edition D&D a new school game, I don't. I quite frankly think it's an old school system. That's an interesting debate I guess we can have. But that's a big part of our show, as it's become North Texas. I mean, I think North Texas has as much 5e as it does anything else. And that's...
I think last year we had, if I remember correctly, last year we had as much 5e as we did earlier editions. So yeah,
I think it's a pretty widely held opinion among the old schoolers that even if they prefer, some old school system, that 5e kind of basically works with that kind of gaming, and there's way less hatred of it than there was of 3rd edition D&D. Everybody hated it.
I'll just chime in with my conversations with these guys. Like, I just was talking to Steve Winter, and he and I share the opinion that 5e is the definitive version of Dungeons and Dragons. Lawrence Schick holds that same opinion. These guys are have not had anything to do with D&D in quite a while, but that's how they feel about 5e. Anyway, we're veering this off subject.
It's an interesting one. Okay, finish. Go ahead and finish up on what it is that makes Gamehole Con old school, and then what we are going to do for the video is do a very quick pause so that I can break up the video later on, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So Alex, you go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, so I guess if I had to make it short and sweet, it would be focus on the attendee experience is what makes it an old school con. Instead of going to a show where you're fed, promotional things, come test this game, try this product, whatever. Our show is built much like Doug's on what people submit, and then they hang out and play the games they want to play. And that, to me, reminds me of Gen Con I went to as a kid. So that's why I would say that's the old school element, at least as I would define it.
I also like to add something to what Alex said, having to do with the guests. When Doug and I first thought about doing the con, we looked at people that would like to show up as guests. And our first con, we had Rob Kuntz, Frank Menser, Tim Cass, but we also had Janelle Jaquays and Dennis Sester, who up to that point I believe had never been a guest at a con. And as the years went by, we found there was a lot of these old school figures in the hobby, the old school hobby, who were never asked to cons. And that was one of the things we noticed the cons we went to, is that very few of these guys were actually attending any con whatsoever. And Alex has done a really good job about that also, getting these guys out. And somebody like Dennis Sester, who was a pivotal figure in in our hobby. Not only did he create the Druid character, but he also created Bunnies and Burrows RPG, and was very influential in the early part of the hobby. He was never asked to cons, and now he's not only being asked to cons, but he's actually doing work again. And I think that's the same with a lot of these guys. They were almost kind of forgotten. They were kind of thrown into the closet, and like, hey, it was great. First edition was great. Early editions were great, but we're going to move on now. We're going to have all these guys who became famous in the '90s. One thing we've really tried to push is a guest from the era before the year 2000, from the early 70s, 80s.
Completely agree. Another example is Doug Niles. That guy, Doug is a wonderful guy and extremely important in terms of the
Mark Miller.
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, I reached out to him, and he hadn't been to a show in years, and he came to our show at first. Just wanted to walk around and check it out, not as a guest, just wanted to see what the show looked like. And he apparently really liked it, and so he's been coming back, and now he's going to more shows now. So that exactly. So Doug and Mike and I are all friends, so we try to do this together collaboratively to get some of these guys to come to our cons and to give them similar experiences, because it's great for all of us.
Why don't we say Mark Miller, because that's the professional attendee. That was my squee moment that I haven't had in a while, because I've been to a lot of cons since 2012, but I walked by Mark Miller at your con, like, oh my God, it's Mark Miller. And so that's the kind of thing you get when you get to go to these things. If you're fans of this stuff, you just don't realize that you're walking around next to these people who wrote the stuff that you care so much about. So good call on all those, though. So
I was amazed that Alex was able to get Ed Greenwood, because Ed Greenwood's one of my RPG heroes. And the Gamehole Con I went to, I did not get to meet Ed, so hopefully that's still in the future. But I thought that was amazing that you were able to get Ed there, because I know he doesn't travel very much at all.
Yeah, he'll be here. He'll be here. He'll be here.
He's easy to find. He's the one that looks like Santa Claus.
That's right.